All right, hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the 18th episode of the Matt Mettler podcast broadcast. I am, in fact, your host, Matt Mettler. I'm very excited to be here with you for this episode of the Matt Mettler podcast broadcast. Been an interesting few days since last I reported to you guys. Had a few things happen, actually, since the last show. So we had a day here in Denver where we had an insane amount of rain a few days back, right? And during that rainstorm, we had just come from getting a sandwich over at Bird Call. And we were stopping at a 7-Eleven to get a drink. As we were stopping at the 7-Eleven, there was a woman who appeared to be homeless, and she was kind of shuffling her way across the street in the pouring rain, in her socks, and it looked like she had just been released from the hospital, which was right across the street. And first off, it seemed kind of crazy they would release her in the rain, but I guess from a hospital's perspective, they don't care. They just want to get you out of there, right? So she was kind of ducked underneath the front of the 7-Eleven, kind of trying to stay dry while the rain passed. And when we came out of the 7-Eleven, she asked me if we could please give her a ride to the bus station down on Broadway, which was probably maybe a mile from where we were. Not that far away, right? And it was one of those moments where I always wonder about these things, right? I always wonder at that moment, like, is that Jesus? Is that Jesus testing you? At the moment that I needed you, you were not there for me, kind of thing, you know? So the Boy Scout in me knew that we were going to have to give this lady a ride. I knew that she was asking for my help. What kind of guy would I be if I turned down somebody who was just straight out asking for your help? So, we opened the door to the van, and she comes around to the side, and she can't get into the van, and she's kind of intoxicated. She's kind of a little bit sauced. So she manages to kind of crawl up into the van, and now she's on her hands and knees on the floor in the van, but she can't seem to get into the seat that we have in the back seat for her, right? She can't seem to get up into it. At this point, I'm completely drenched. I'm standing outside the van. I'm completely drenched trying to help this woman into the van. I don't even know what to do. Right, I don't know what to do because there's nothing to grab onto, and I don't want to hurt this lady, obviously, because we're trying to help her. I don't want to hurt her any. So, thank God, Rebecca comes to the save. She comes and she sees that I just don't know what to do. So she gets back there, and she's dealt with older folks and kids a lot. So she's really good at it. She's really, really good at it. So she tells this lady, she's like, okay, I need you to sit up in the chair. I need you to get up and sit up in the chair. And this lady goes and kind of like rests her head on her arm. And that was when Rebecca could smell the booze on her. So Rebecca tells her, you got to get up. You got to sit in the seat. You got to move so that we can get you down to where you need to go. So finally that gal starts moving, and she kind of gets herself in the seat and everything. And we take her down and drop her off. And overall, the entire thing was traumatic. It was traumatic, right? Because I struggle with being a misanthrope, honestly. I vacillate between humans are the problem and humans are the solution. I struggle with that debate in my mind about, are we the parasites? Are we the problem on the planet of the earth? We might be. We might be, right? So it was really traumatic trying to help this homeless woman out, and just recognizing that, and she said, thank goodness for you. Thank you so much for helping me. And I was thankful that I could help her. But at the same time, it was basically a traumatic experience, right? It was like, how do we solve these problems in the longer term? Maybe if we can't solve them, how do we at least make them better? How do we at least make them not as bad, right? Because there's definitely a significant number of homeless people who live in Denver and who occupy it, right? There's no doubt about it. And it's one of the things that I've come to realize as I've gotten older. When I was young, I was like, everybody that's living on the street has a story. And that's true. Everybody that is living on the street has a story, I'm sure. But for some people that are out there, living on the street is a choice, right? They could choose to go do something else, but they just don't. They choose to live on the street, and they choose to make their way that way because it provides for them what they see as the most optimal situation as far as lack of rules. I guess in a way it's like it's the freest living you can have is living on the street with nothing. I know that sounds ridiculous to say that, but there's some truth in it. Like when you have nothing, you can go anywhere you want. Nothing stops you. But it's funny how the homeless seem to stay in certain areas. So yeah, that was quite the experience trying to help that lady out. And I hope that karmically I paid it forward, if nothing else, right? So that leads me into my next short topic that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is the fact that I feel like I've been incredibly lucky in my life. Even when I've had troubles and pitfalls, I've managed to pull myself out of it and have friends that have managed to help pull me out of it. And I realize how what separates a beggar from a rich man is a lot of times a roll of the dice. A little bit of luck goes a long ways towards making some people rich and making some people poor. So I feel very, very lucky throughout my life to, like when I got mixed up in meth and the fact that I was able to get away from it and get my life back after that. And I feel very lucky for all of those things, people, all those things. Which leads me into my next topic. I did a gig yesterday and boy, was it humbling. It was hella humbling to go do that gig because I had a bunch of problems on the show before we even got started. We ended up pulling off the show and getting the band on and doing the show, but it was not the way that I want it to be, right? That was not the way I wanted it to go down. It was there was just a whole bunch of permutations to the gig that didn't work out along the timelines that we had plotted, and then when that didn't work out, everything it just cascaded into like we were running hella late behind, right? So we did eventually get the band on. The band on the show was great. They were really great, and they just rolled with it. And you know, special thanks goes out to that band. They know who they are. I'm not allowed to say, but they know who they are. And those guys were the best for just being so calm and cool and cool about it, even though it was incredibly humbling. I didn't have any pad left, and that was what happened, right? It was rushing up to the last minute until we put the band on, and so that was incredibly humbling to go out there and have that experience. And it made me feel like, you know what? Don't get cocky, kid. You need to make sure that you have your shit together. So that was a challenging gig, man. It was challenging. It felt good to be back out there. It felt good to mix a band. That was cool. It's like once I got the band on stage and I was actually doing the mixing part, that felt really good. Right. But the chaotic stuff that led up to putting the band on stage, that was a little nightmarish, a little bit. And then I have to give an MVP award to the guy that I was working with that came with me from the company that I was with, because he was really good. And he just kind of kept working in the background while I was trying to work to solve the problem. And I have a saying about guys in the concert business, people in the concert business, and that is that new guys go into standby, good guys go into autopilot. Meaning that when new guys don't know what to do, they just put their hands in their pockets and they stall. They go into standby mode, right? Versus when you have a good dude, they just keep doing all the things that they would normally keep doing. They're not reliant or dependent on you to make it happen. So that guy that I was with gets the MVP award for just being so great in making all the things happen in the background while I was working to try and figure out that problem. So to that guy, I'm just very thankful. He was great to work with, and I look forward to doing more shows with him. He was a good dude and great cat, right? That's what I love about show business people, good dudes. My next brief topic that I kind of wanted to talk about is, why is it still okay to discriminate against people who use pot? I was really putting some thought on this one, right? And to me, it's like using pot is just a lifestyle choice. It's not unlike many other lifestyle choices that people make that are not, you cannot discriminate against people for their religion. But in reality, your religion is a lifestyle choice. You are not born Christian. Your parents might make you a Christian shortly after you're born, right? But you're not born a Christian. You're not born a Muslim. That is something that you learn along the way, right? And it's a lifestyle choice. And so to me, it's like, How can we if you can't discriminate against people for being LGBTQ plus, then you can't discriminate against people for choosing to smoke pot, especially in a state where we have made it legal. Like I'm really kind of running out of patience for the idea that the populace can vote for something and make it legal, and that a huge part of the society can just choose to ignore that. Right? It's my feelings that if you're going to do business in the state of Colorado, you have to abide by Colorado state laws. And the state laws say that it's allowed here. So get over it. If we just draw a line in the sand and say, look, get over it, either you accept people the way they are or you don't do business here. When it comes to capitulating to pressure from outside groups, one bad review and 15 people making a stink about it is enough to get a company to fold like a wallet these days, dude. So to me, we need to start putting pressure on these businesses in Colorado to be like, look, period. It's not acceptable. Not acceptable. It's legal. It's legal to do in the state of Colorado, and it should not be okay to still discriminate against people who are doing something that's legal. I cannot fathom how the hell we are caught in the middle of that trap. So we need to work on that. And honestly, I'm kind of at the point where, if the left is just going to be like, look, here's what we want, we're going to burn the shit down if you don't give it to us, we need to start being a little more forthright with what we actually want, which is I want the freedom to be able to smoke pot without being discriminated against by businesses or anybody else. Right? It shouldn't be that big of a deal. We got millions of people that smoke fucking weed in America. It's been 80 something years since the war on weed began with the Harry J. Anslinger and all that stuff. I mean, in 80 years, haven't we done enough damage? Can't we just let it go and move on? Is smoking herbs really causing that much of a problem in the United States? Really? Come on. If you really believe that it causes that many problems, I need to see the evidence. I'm not going to just be like, okay, cool. Yeah, no, cool. Okay. You say so? Yeah, no problem. The reality is that we just don't have enough evidence to support the demonization of marijuana to the extent and level that it is. There just isn't. So I'd really like to see something happen here in the very near future, i.e. at the governmental level, just take marijuana off Schedule 1, right? Because we now have a drug approved by the FDA for kids to stop seizures, and it comes from cannabis. So that is proof that cannabis has medicinal value. How can it be on the list? This show has really been good for me, man. This show makes me do a lot of research. This show makes me learn a lot of things. Like I spent the whole morning today learning about fascism, because when me and Jay talked about fascism, I just wanted to go back over my understanding of it and make sure that what I was talking about was the truth and that I wasn't misleading you guys, right? And fascism is a very interesting and utterly complicated, complex subject, because when you look it up on the Wikipedia, a lot of times what we think of is Nazism, right? Nazism as a form of fascism, but there are all kinds of fascism out there in the world, right? Fascism is a strict set of rules that people adhere to, and they're not tolerant of other opinions, and they're kind of totalitarian, and they usually don't mind doing a little bit of violence on people. Violence is seen as a means to an end. Things like that. And that was one of the commonalities that all the different regimes shared, is that they were all pretty violent, and that for the most part, you could basically say that fascism and being a bully are the same thing. For all intents and purposes, the word fascist actually means being a bully. Now, what's so funny is when you look at the people who claim to not be those people, they're the ones that actually act like bullies. They're the ones that actually act like Hitler's brown shirts, where they're out there intimidating people and committing violent acts against people, breaking glass. That was a big thing with the Nazi brown shirts. So I don't understand how you think you can fight fascism with fascism. I'm not sure how you can be a fascist and fight fascism. Maybe my math is incorrect. Maybe I'm not doing the right math to arrive at the answer to that, but I sure would like somebody to explain to me how being a fascist is supposed to stop fascism from taking hold. If anything, you're actually setting up the precursory events to fascism taking hold. That was what happened in Weimar Germany prior to the Nazis coming to power. Hitler's brown shirts started to cause a lot of trouble and a lot of mucky muck, and they started beating people up and hassling the Jews that owned stores, breaking their windows, and basically making it impossible for them. Sound familiar? It's like, yeah, there's this group out there in America that kind of does a lot of that same stuff. And the craziest part is that they claim to be trying to stop Nazis. It's almost like Mussolini fighting Hitler, right? You got two different forms of fascism that are in competition with each other is really what it comes down to. And the political left doesn't like the form of fascism that we have now, which is corporate. And actually, I'm not very fond of the type of fascism that we have now because it's a corporatized kind of fascism, where you now have a situation where, so typically in fascistic governments, all the elements of production and all of the things that produce money and produce all the things that the country produces, they all become the purview of the government in a fascistic society. So what happens, instead of directly controlling the companies, the government controls the leaders of the companies. And that way they don't have to claim their failure. They don't have to own their failure. When companies fail, politicians can always look at it and say, wasn't us. Wasn't us, it was these guys over here, right? And so in a way, corporate fascism, where you have politicians as one arm of the corporate entity, is hugely problematic for us right now. And the reason for that is that corporations get to exercise a hugely outsized amount of influence in the public sphere versus the rest of us. I'm no competition to Google. I'm no threat to Google. I'm one guy, right? And yet, Google still feels the need to suppress what I have to say. Why? Why does that make sense? Once upon a time, Google was a search engine. Now, it seems like it's the next government of the entire fucking planet of Earth. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea of corporations being so in bed with the government that you can't even tell where one starts and the other stops. There's so many government programs that are dubious at best and evil, if we're to be honest, right? And yet we pursue these things, and yet we have these policies, and yet we try and continue on this path, and I don't understand it. The Founding Fathers would be kind of pissed. The Founding Fathers would be fucking real upset if they knew all the stuff that was going on in America in 2019. I don't know how we fix it. I don't know how we remedy it. I don't know how we fix it. I don't know what we do to make it better, but we got to figure it out. We got to do better. I know that. I wanted to talk about how there's been a few things in the last few years that have reaffirmed my faith in people. There have been a few things that have happened that make me lose a little bit of faith, but also a few things that reaffirm me in knowing that there are still a lot of really good people in the world. And one of those things was when a few years back, I was driving home from my mom's after Christmas, and I flipped my car. Just onto its side, not on its roof, just onto its side. And fortunately, the way things all worked out, I was very lucky. I was not injured. The car was only mildly damaged. I got really lucky on that one. Another example of how lucky I am, right? When I had that accident, I climbed out of the car, and so many good, decent people stopped just to make sure I was okay. Just to make sure everything was okay. There must have been 50 or 60 people that stopped during the time while I was out there, because I was kind of out in the middle of BFE. It took 45 minutes for a tow truck to even get out there, right? So a lot of people drove by. And so many good people stopped to just make sure I was okay. Don't know me from Adam, right? But wanted to make sure I was okay. And it's just proof that we have a country full of good people, right? Really is. I'm really loving BitChute. I don't know why I have more views on BitChute than I do on YouTube, but I'm loving BitChute. So if you're watching me on BitChute, you rock, and you're awesome, and thank you. BitChute, thank you for supporting freedom and supporting content creators, because apparently YouTube only wants the big people now. YouTube only wants people that are already grandfathered in and or the mainstream media and or Hollywood. YouTube is now a different version of the mainstream media. It's like an aggregator for mainstream media and stuff. And that's making it more uncool by the day. Part of the reason that I'm not on Facebook very much anymore is because Facebook became uncool. They didn't take their own advice in that movie. You know, like once you make it uncool, not so much, man. People want to bail. And so they made it uncool, and YouTube is becoming uncool. And it really makes me sad because there's so many content creators on there that I really like, you know, that I still want to support and probably will continue to support at least for a while. But it makes me recognize that YouTube is yesterday and BitChute is the future. Companies that aren't YouTube are the future, because in a world of corporate fascism where you're not allowed to say anything, what looks cool and radical and new is a place where you're allowed to speak your mind. The other thing I can't understand about a company as big as YouTube and or Google is that you guys are so big, you don't have to capitulate to anybody. You could just straight up be like, look, hey, look, you know, it's too problematic for us to bother censoring this stuff. You know, we're just going to put it up, and if you don't like it, don't watch it. They could just do that. They could be like, look, it is not on us what people put on the platform. And we don't care if you don't like it. It's going to stay there. It's just, we're not taking it down, right? Like, we're not messing with it. Unless it's a clear violation of the law, why should they censor it? Porn that's forbidden or something like that. Then, of course, I understand taking it down. But anything that's just public interaction or stuff like that, or hate speech, as Mark Dice likes to say, I'm glad that there are these other places out there that allow you to express yourself. I started posting on Gab. I'm checking out Minds. I'm learning about these other new places. And I'm trying to get away from YouTube. I'm trying to get away from Google in general. For a long time, I've actually not been using Google for searching. I've been using DuckDuckGo to search with. Sometimes I'll still search with Google. It depends. A lot of times I'll do an image search with Google, right? Because they seem to get the better results. But when it comes to other searches, I try to not search with Google, right? Because it's not cool the way that Google tries to examine the minutia of your life to the point where they're trying to control you in a prison you can't even see. You know, where they're trying to build a box around you that you don't even see, that limits your ability to see things and hear ideas. That's fascism. That's fascism. It's a silent censorship where nobody even knows it's really happening because it all happens in the shadows. And we have got to figure this out and change it. And I really hope that, I was thinking, you know, what they should do is just blast YouTube with an enormous fine. Enormous. Just crush them. Just lay the hammer on them, right? Because I was thinking about this. It's like in America, corporations and companies are treated as though they are people. They have the same kind of rights. They have the same legal status as a person, as a human person, right? Companies and people have a similar legal status, right? Companies are they exist for all intents and purposes, right? And so if that is the case, if companies are people, then what kind of people are they? And I would argue that Google is a psychopathic megalomaniac. Google is a psychopathic megalomaniac who wants nothing but to control the entire planet. They want to control every aspect of search. They want to control advertising. They want to control everything. They do not want anybody to have a sliver of room to compete against them. And if they do, they just buy them right up. Same with anybody in Silicon Valley. As soon as anything comes out that competes with anything in Silicon Valley, they buy it right up, because what they recognize is that it would be far more dangerous to have a competitor in your space who might draw away people, who might change the paradigm of you must toe the line, you must conform, you must say the things we want you to say, or you can't be on these platforms. Twitter. Because basically, if you're on those platforms and you're not saying the things that they want to hear or the things that they like, you're not allowed to use their platform. And that's a real bullshit game. Keep playing that game and see where that leads to. It makes me think that corporations are able to amass far more power than any individual, and they're allowed to exercise enormous outsized influence in the public space as a result of that individuals simply cannot. And we as the people need to break these companies up or stall them out or punish them punitively, hard, right? Like you could give Google a $5 trillion fine. They could pay it. They'd figure it out. I guarantee you they would. Give Google a $5 trillion fine for meddling with election results. Because they did. To this day, if you go and type Crooked Hill, it still won't recommend it, right? Even though thousands of people have searched that on a pretty routine basis, probably since the election, it still won't recommend it. There won't be any recommendations for Hillary that don't glowingly speak about her or recommend something positive about her. But if you type in Trump is, you'll get 15 autofills for Nazi, fascist, sexist, bigot, like all of that stuff will come up. You mean to tell me that's purely by accident? That Hillary Clinton comes up just as clean as a whistle? You can't even find any dirt about her unless you Google it specifically? Come on. You mean to tell me that they aren't trying to influence the elections? To me, that's the reason to break them up right there. If you got a company that wields so much power that they're trying to influence the outcome of an election, they need to be broken up right now. That's an existential threat to the American people. It really is, because where the fuck does this fascism shit ever end? Where does it stop, dude? Are we allowed to have an opinion? Am I allowed to have thoughts that are mine? These are questions we better ask. All right. I think I've done enough ranting for today. And I know that this episode is actually going to turn out to be kind of a weird episode that I wasn't quite planning on. But in a way, I'm glad that I said all that stuff because it's been on my mind. And it's the truth. The truth, the beautiful thing about the truth is undeniable. You can deny the truth, but you know it when you see it. You know it when you hear it. And you know that I'm telling you the truth. I think that that's why people come back. Because they know that I'm telling the truth, dude. That shit is complicated and we got to figure it out and do better, right? So I want to thank every single one of you guys for joining me here. And I want to say that if you're joining me on BitChute, you're awesome. If you're joining me on YouTube, thank you. But if you're joining me on BitChute, you rock. Because it means that you've already decided that YouTube is semi-whack, that YouTube is not your friend. YouTube is not our friend. They should call it their tube, right? Because YouTube implies that it's about us, and their tube it implies it's about them, which is exactly what it is, man. So I hope they have fun with their tube because they're driving all of us off. They're really making me, and what pisses me off is that I pay for that shit. I pay for Google to censor my content and tell me what I can watch and can't watch, even though we have this thing called the internet. In 2003, the internet was more free than it is now. Because now you got all these fascist corporations trying to stick your nose in their armpit. Oh, man, this is going to be great. This is going to be a great episode. I can't wait to edit this one together and see it, man, because it's going to be great. I know that. So thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and comment. And if you think I'm a crazy nut job, man, tell me. Say, Matt Mettler, you're a crazy nut job, dude. Like, you're talking crazy. And I think maybe it is. I'm crazy enough to believe that we could still change it. I'm crazy enough to believe that it doesn't have to be this way. I'm crazy enough to believe that we could do something that makes it better, right? So you're right. I am crazy. I'm crazy enough to believe all of that stuff, right? All right. So you're the best. All of you. Thank you so much for watching the Matt Mettler podcast. And thank you for joining me here for episode 18. I really appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much. The Matt Mettler podcast is a Matt Mettler production, copyright 2019.